Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Ready for your next adventure? KLM Royal Dutch Airlines brings you Real Deal Days, your chance to uncover real adventures and create real memories. Taste the real Amsterdam, explore the real Barcelona, and discover the real Johannesburg, along with many more destinations around the world. Secure your real deal today and seize the moment with KLM Royal Dutch Airlines. Restrictions apply. See terms and conditions at KLM.com.
Hey Eagles fans, this is Chris Franklin from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the No-Huddle Show podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the Philadelphia Eagles. Before we begin, I want to remind you that you can read our content on NJ.com/Eagles, and be sure to bookmark that to get the latest Eagles news and analysis. I also want to mention that this podcast is brought to you by Penco Tech. With 2 convenient campuses in Blackwood, New Jersey and Bristol, PA, Penco Tech has provided comprehensive, hands-on career training for more than 50 years, featuring programs in HVAC, electrical, plumbing, automotive technology, and more. With dedicated instructors and career placement assistants, Penco Tech can give you the skills and confidence to build a brighter future. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Learn more and take the first step today at pencotech.edu. Well, we're a couple days into free agency, and there's a lot that's been going on. We'll get into it right now with both Bob Brookover and Cayden Steele. Guys, how are you doing today?
Hey, Chris, how's it going? We're not even really officially in the league New Year yet, and people are jumping off the Walt Whitman Bridge, but everything's fine here in Manahawkin, New Jersey. The bridge that goes into Long Beach Island is pretty long, and I'm not going to jump off
it. yeah, don't do that. Yeah, we love you, Bob. We love you, Bob. You're good.
I love you, Bob.
Oh, well, thank you. Hey, Cayden, how you doing, man?
Doing great. We'll try our best today to help fans who are listening calm down. There's a good reason to pump the brakes a little bit on everyone freaking out. I don't think it's the end of the world. There's still a lot of off season left. There's still in not a great free agency cost, but there's still some decent impactful players, and they got a draft, and they got all the way to August, and all the way to the trade deadline next year to make moves. So to freak out after not even 2 days of free agency, I think everyone can pump the brakes a little bit.
All right, cool. We'll get into the reason what's going on as well too. But first off, we're not even going to start with the free agency aspect of it. We're actually going to start with a trade that happened on Tuesday that surprised a lot of us, especially among us here on this podcast. The Eagles traded safety C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the Houston Texans for guard Kenyon Green. And also what happened was that the Eagles and Texans also flip-flopped picks, with the Eagles receiving a 2026 fifth-rounder and the Texans receiving a 2026 sixth-rounder. So I'm going to ask you guys this to start things off. What are your initial reactions to this deal?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be impossible not to be surprised. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, if this is the end of his Philadelphia saga, it's going to be one of the most fascinating. This was my initial thought. That's the most fascinating Philadelphia saga that maybe I've ever seen, definitely in football, where guy plays 2 years, goes to 2 Super Bowls, wins one of them, has 6 interceptions in both of them. They got rid of him in a year in between there. Felt like they needed his edginess back on the field. He came back. He gave him that edginess. They win a Super Bowl. That's the guy you expect to be here for a while, at least for the duration of his 3-year contract that he signed last offseason. But he's not. And it tells me that mostly that something's going on here beyond what we know. It also tells me the Eagles are really want to become a young team from a financial standpoint, because they, I think Howie Roseman is looking at his future and saying, hey, you know what? I like to get these deals done early with guys like Jordan Mailata and Landon Dickerson, and the list is long. All those guys, the guys that they consider their core guys, and he's not going to have what he needs to do that when it comes time to do Cam Jurgens, and to even a greater extent, the happiest guy in the world yesterday for Milton Williams was Jalen Carter, because his $26 million a year, God, what does that mean when it comes for Jalen Carter time to get his extension? So I think there's some of that going on too.
What about you, Cayden?
I think Bob covered it, pretty well, where, the stuff that's been reported is that this is more of a financial move than anything else. But at the same time, you figured maybe there's something else, potentially behind it. But from the financial perspective, it does make sense if you're trying to save money going forward. You can't really hand out big contracts to every single player. And you're going to have to make tough choices, because you're going to have to pay Nolan and Jalen Carter, and just Jalen Hurts is eventually going to want another extension. You just can't pay everyone. And they're going to have to move on from guys who are, outside of their core players. And I'm not really sure if they viewed CJ Gardner-Johnson as a core player. But in terms of the loss, I mean, I didn't expect CJ Gardner-Johnson to be off this team this year. I thought they would have both starting safeties back with him and Reed. I thought they were a pretty good duo last year. Now you're going to have to replace him. And look, at times I think he was inconsistent last year, but 6 interceptions last season. He's a ball hawk. We talk about how good this team was at forcing turnovers. He was really good at that. He brought an edge to the defense. He brought an edge to the defense in 2022, and he had 6 picks. He's with that, with a combination of just his toughness and just how he plays and his ability to force turnovers, it's really helped his defense in 2 different seasons. They've made the Super Bowl. We saw how they looked in 2023 when they didn't have good safety play. Justin Evans, they tried to fill it in. It didn't really pan out. They tried to trade for Kevin Byard. It didn't pan out. This time you figured they might give Sidney Brown a shot, and they drafted him in the 3rd round, and that's probably who they would hope wins the starting job, because they spent a pretty premium pick on him. But there's no guarantee that he's going to be a good starting safety. Maybe they'll add an outside option, but there's no guarantee he'll be better than CJ Gardner-Johnson. But overall, though, I am confident in Vic Fangio's ability to get the most out of his players, whether that's Sidney Brown or another young option. Maybe they'll bring from the outside, and maybe this won't be the hugest loss, but it's still going to be tough. And then I think in return, the player they got in Kenyon Green, who has not been a good NFL player, and he's dealt with injuries, but it just shows me that, at one point, the Eagles must have liked Kenyon Green, or Jeff Stoutland must have liked Kenyon Green. So I don't think he's had a good NFL career so far, but he is an interesting player that we'll probably talk about more.
Now, I'll say this. When I look at the move itself, barring CJ saying, I'm holding out or I'm going to be disruptive and until I get a new contract, I'm not a fan of this deal. And I know you free up some space for cap room, but from the way you're seeing things and the way that you hear and talk about potentially repeating and making deep runs for the playoffs, I just don't agree with the move. I know there's questions about whether he, when it comes to him helping in the run game, tackle, I thought he did fine in that. I think that having a person like that at the back end of your defense makes it tougher for a quarterback, because it's one of the things like it's like knowing the neighborhood bullies around the area. It's like, that guy's around there. I better take the long way home or what have you. I thought he brought that type of presence in the back end when it came to quarterbacks and trying to account for them. And then I thought there was something to it in terms of when it comes to the attitude he brought to the defense. I mean, look how many times during that parade you saw him talking about the BTA belts to, and since the family show, I won't say the last word, but it was one of those things where he brought that swagger, he brought that attitude, which can be infectious on his defense. I know you have Nakobe Dean, who's the leader, whatever. You know, you had Slay, and you don't know what's going on with that because he's meeting with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and you don't know if he's back or not. We can talk about that later, but I just thought he was an important piece of that back end, and now you're shopping around, and you've added more questions, and I'll bring up my thoughts about Kenyon Green when we talk about Mekhi Becton. But do you think? I'll ask you guys just quickly as well too. I know you said, and I know Bobby said it would be fascinating on that when it's all said and done. Right? If you had to write a snap, if you guys had to write a snap piece right now on his legacy with this team, what do you think CJ's legacy is with this team?
A glue to a championship defense, and like you mentioned, Chris, he did bring that attitude. I think he's a good legacy, and as Bob mentioned, just a very odd career for the Eagles. A player who's had such a fundamental impact on two different championship teams, but the Eagles have shown you two different times, whether it was in contract negotiations a couple years ago, and this time that they don't view him the same way. Maybe us or people on the outside view him.
Yeah, I only covered him one of those 2 years. He's a fascinating character because he also does scare you a little bit because he can, although he seemed to control that down the stretch. And his best football, I thought, this year came in the stretch run and the postseason. He was just really, really good when they needed him to be. I do think, and he kind of hinted at this when he came back, that he's a guy who benefited from being in Philadelphia too, that there was something about this team in this city that allowed him to be the best guy he can be. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in Houston, but his legacy in Philadelphia, it's cemented. I mean, it's his legacy in Philadelphia is kind of like Tanner McKee's first venture into playing NFL quarterback. Nothing but hits. 2 for 2. Tanner was 3 for 4 with 2 touchdowns. CJ went 2 for 2 and getting to the Super Bowl 2 seasons and 12 interceptions along the way. It's a great legacy to have. And it would, another thing to be fascinating legacy wise, just talking about his legacy. All right, let's say he plays another 3, 4, 5 years and retires. At that point, he'll be 30 something. Does he retire as an Eagle? Even if he spends 3 years, like let's say he spends 3 years in Houston, they make the playoffs twice, but never really go anywhere. Does he retire as an Eagle? I don't know.
Well, we know it's not going to be a Detroit Lion the way that ended out there.
He ain't going to be a Saint either. After we found out in New Orleans that he ain't no Saint.
Yeah, so true. And we mentioned and we talked about Kenyon Green, and we now know you see that move, plays guard. What do you think happens now with Mekhi Becton? Do you still think he's coming back?
More than likely, I think Mekhi Becton is gone. If you look around free agency currently, there's not a lot of strengths left at certain position groups, but there's still some pretty good guards left, and he's one of them. And there's a lot of offensive line needy teams, and I think the Eagles were prepared to potentially let Mekhi Becton to go. I mean, they can't really afford to sign a lineman to a huge deal with the 4 guys that they already have in place who are under big contracts. This move, I think, only helps solidifies that. I'm not going to say there's no chance, but Kenyon Green is a potential option that maybe Jeff Stoutland views him as his next Mekhi Becton. I know they're a little different, but it's another big guy who's really athletic. He views him maybe as potential competition for Tyler Steen. And I already mentioned Sidney Brown as a guy that the Eagles probably want, him to come into training camp and win a starting job because they spent a 3rd round pick on him. They drafted Tyler Steen their same year, and they probably want the same outcome from him as well. So I have a hard time imagining Mekhi Becton coming back at this point. I do think he'll get paid by some other team to be a starter. Maybe there's a world where you can get him back for a discount because teams are concerned about his injury history or something along those lines. But I think this is a move where they wanted to get some offensive line depth back, a guard in particular, And Kenyon Green might have some upside remaining. And Tyler Steen as a guy that they could potentially like. Maybe in his third year, he could take a step. So I think that's probably the end of the road for Mekhi Becton, who really enjoyed playing in Philadelphia. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out.
Yeah, I would agree with Cayden here that Mekhi is probably going to be moving elsewhere. I just think he's going to get too much money from somebody else, and the Eagles are not going to have equal value. I mean, when we start talking about contracts, I thought Milton Williams was sensational. Do I think he's the third best defensive tackle in the league where he's going to be paid? We're about to find out, because he's not going to have the benefit of Jalen Carter alongside him next year, and as many good defensive players alongside him. So I don't, think that the Eagles view Mekhi Becton as a guy that they can't lose or that they want to pay so much money. And I think part of bringing Kenyon Green in is, as Cayden pointed out, everything gets Jeff Stoutland's stamp of approval, and they were obvious. This guy was a first-round pick, is number 15 overall. They were looking at him, and Stoutland got a good look at him, and he says, "I can do something with that." So we'll see. But in the meantime, he's created a competition with Steen, and I would not count on Trevor Keegan, because I just think they like him in terms of he was a project last year, but he was a guy who had a nastiness to him, and when he was at Michigan and was kind of the leader of an offensive line and won a national championship. So I think they're doing, by getting Green back, they're creating the competition they want to see, and the draft is another place where you can create more competition in that sense. So yeah, I don't. But to answer your question, I don't think we're going to see Mekhi Becton again in Eagles green. You're going to have to find a team that doesn't play in green next year.
And one thing I think of when I look at this, I envision like one of those win probability charts that we watch during the games where it says, oh, well, this team has a 48% chance of winning after one play, whatever. Once this trade was made, to me, it went down from probably, I had 75% all the way down to 33%. I think there's a lane available where he could come back, but I think that lane is so slim right now. I don't know if even Saquon Barkley can run a hole right behind him, because you look at that and the money that's involved here. Sure, Green is on his final year of his deal, and you could potentially re-sign him to extension, but to have him as your back as a backup when you already have Tyler Steen and Keegan and all these other guys, yeah, it's very, very slim. Things can change. Maybe they move on from Steen. Maybe they trade that one. I severely doubt it because of the way his versatility of playing guard and tackle. But I think it's done. And in terms of Green, and when talking about Kenyon Green, I initially wanted the Eagles to draft him in the first round. I really did, because I thought he could be the new chain. He could be the replacement for Lane Johnson. Boy, this is why I'm glad I'm not a GM, because I would have been fired by now if I said that, because Lane's still playing, and Kenyon has struggled when he's with the Texans. And there's raw tools that are there, and he just needs to be refined. And the Eagles have Stoutland available to help him out. This is going to be another tough coaching job for him, and you hope he's up to the task to be able to complete that. So now that we've gotten the trade discussion aside, the Eagles have lost 4 players in free agency so far. They've lost defensive tackle Milton Williams to the New England Patriots. They've lost edge rusher Josh Sweat to the Arizona Cardinals. They lost cornerback Isaiah Rodgers to the Minnesota Vikings. And they even lost Oren Burks, who started his kneecap, that gruesome injury. Oren Burks came back, but he's going on signing a deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. Of the contracts for those 4 free agents, which one has surprised you the most in terms of just either years or money? What contracts surprises you guys the most?
I'm not sure if necessarily any are surprising in terms of money. Especially when it comes to the top 2 guys, I expected them to both be paid, in Josh Sweat and Milton Williams. I think in the one, to me, that's a little risky in terms of years and guaranteed money and all that is Josh Sweat. It's on the surface, it doesn't seem like a lot. 4 years, $76.4 million. about 19 mil per year. And look, he's an impactful pass rusher. There wasn't many guys available out there. Yeah, he's a pretty good player, and people have talked about how underrated Josh Sweat has been throughout the years, and I agree with that sentiment. But at the same time, unlike Milton Williams, who I think is going to continue to ascend, Josh Sweat's going to be 28 next year. By the end of that contract, he's going to be 32. So he's not as young as Milton. We know about the knee injury in the past, and it hasn't really stopped him from being a productive NFL player. But you wonder a little bit, just going back in time, about that. Like, is there going to be any longevity issues when he hits 30? He's a really good player, but I think he's more of a 1B type pass rusher than a 1A. In Arizona, I think with the contract they gave him, which compared to like a guy like Myles Garrett, just got paid $40 million and it's reset the edge market, it's not a lot of money. And it's not as much as Milton Williams, but $19 million for a guy who I don't think is going to fix your pass rush problems. Yes, he was really great in the Super Bowl, but there's been streaks where he's just not as impactful in terms of getting after the quarterback. I think he's a really good player, and he could help set a culture in Arizona on defense. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad signing, but I wonder, like, how much better can Josh Sweat get? Is there an upward trajectory, or have we kind of seen the best of Josh Sweat, which is fine and solid, but it's just, I don't know if he's going to be able to turn around a pass rush in Arizona. That I think it's going to need more guys. So if he's just a piece of it, I think it's fine, but it is. I just think he's a fascinating case. I think he's a really good player, but I think there's more risk with that contract than I think people would think.
Yeah, I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go with Milton Williams here. I alluded to her earlier that the number just flew off the screen at me. 26 million and 104 million. Those two numbers, jumped off the screen at me. I was like, wow. I watched Milton Williams all year, and I really think he's turned into a terrific player. And if you're the Eagles, the hardest part for me, if you're the Eagles, especially guys like Sweat and even more so Williams, because he's younger. You develop these guys, and now you got to go watch and see what they do in another place at a time when, especially Milton Williams in the prime of his career. As a guy who covered baseball for a long time, I used to always listen to managers and general managers lament, they'd be developing a young pitcher, especially a kid that they drafted out of high school, and he's taking his bumps and bruises through the age, through his teenage years, and then into his early 20s, and then all of a sudden at 26 years old, long after he's left your organization, he's this great pitcher. But it took him all that time to develop. Where these guys developed pretty quickly, and it happens differently in football. But the Eagles developed them, and they've become pretty good players. But I just don't see Milton Williams as a $26 million, which puts him third on that list of defensive tackles being paid. And again, I'll just reiterate the point. I'll ask you two. I'll throw the question back at you two guys. What is Jalen Carter going to get per year when it comes time for the Eagles to? What's that number going to be? Like just a per year number in your guys' minds.
Sorry.
You're good. Go ahead. Yeah, because I'm thinking how he finishes. Yeah, you're good.
Close to Myles Garrett. I mean, chance to reset the market potentially. Maybe not as much because Myles Garrett's an edge rusher, but you're thinking at least high 30s, right? You can argue with another year that Jalen Carter is going to be a top 2, top 3 defensive player in this league, and I think it's going to be an all-time rate. It's going to be up there in the high 30s, and it's going to be a lot to pay him, and I think they're getting ready for that.
I think it's one of those things where if he finishes with an all-pro year, which he's capable of, and he finishes in the top 3 of Defensive Player of the Year, I wouldn't be surprised if we see 42 based off of what we're seeing with interior. There's a push now with all these with the guard. If you notice through free agency, all the guards and defensive tackles, there's a serious push to try to shore up those areas, especially with what teams saw this past season.
Right.
So I would not be surprised 42. Just for his age, the way he's disruptive, and how and the impact he can have on everything else. I think it's just those factors. I think it's very serious. And you know who his agent is?
Oh, yeah.
Drew Rosenhaus. And you saw what he got for Josh Sweat.
Oh, yeah.
So
I'll make one more point on free agency while we're here. Just really happy and can't wait to watch Oren Burks, because I think Oren was I know he was. I talked to him enough during the season, tickled about the Zach Bond story and how he went from being kind of went from being, he's a really good special teams player, and that's what he'll always be. And Oren's a little, I think, a year older than Zach, but I think Oren views himself as a guy who, hey, I could do more. I could be a better player if you give me a chance. And now he's going to get that chance with the Bengals. He settled for, a very modest 2-year, $5 million deal. But, but knowing that he has a chance to prove himself. And he was so good in the postseason and so important. One of the things I think that, and I think GJ put it over the top for a lot of fans, but I think one of the things that makes it harder, if you're a team that finished 9-8, I mean, either didn't make the playoffs or were out in the first round of the playoffs, when you're getting rid of guys who were the caliber in terms of where their status was on a team, so what? But with the Eagles, they had so much depth and so many people contributing to the Super Bowl, it makes it harder to watch those guys go away. And Oren Burks and Isaiah Rodgers both fit into that category. So it's going to be fun to see what those guys do in other places now.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Bengals. Al Golden, he mentioned he's going to use the same type of system, and you see the way that the Eagles played a lot of nickel, and you saw the way Burks was able to play in space when given a chance. So he's another guy who could potentially have a breakout season, or at least put up better numbers than what is expected of him. So I agree with you on that. Now here we go on to the run pass option segment of our show, where I'm going to read a statement, and if these guys agree with it, they're going to run with it and tell why. And if they pass it and they don't agree with it, they'll pass and they'll tell why again as well too. So here's the first question. The Eagles will make a surprise trade to add another player to the defensive side of the ball. Are you running or are you passing?
I'm going to pass on this one. I think Trey Hendrickson is the candidate that people are thinking the best available player that might get traded this offseason, but his asking price is probably be over $30 million or about $30 million, which I think will be a little too much for the Eagles, and they're going to have to give up draft picks. Maybe there's a different bargain, a guy on a rookie deal out there who's getting shopped. So I'm not going to say it's not a possibility, but I don't expect some high-profile name in a big-time trade to come to this defense. I think Howie Roseman talked about it at the his press conference at the Combine, that a lot of young players are going to have to play, especially on this defense. And my guess is they're going to be counting on Moore Jomo and Jalix Hunt and Jeremiah Trotter and Keely Ringo and Sidney Brown, those guys to take steps. And then you look at the draft class, especially on the D-line. It's a really, really strong defensive tackle, defensive end. There's some good corners in this draft. There's some good safeties. I mean, I think overall probably a better defensive draft than an offensive draft. So I think they're going to be able to replenish on defense through the draft. And they already have a lot of young guys in place that they're hoping to take that next step. I could see a trade for a guy, maybe take a flyer on a guy who either is not a part-time starter elsewhere, or a rotational guy or something, or a guy that you believe has been underused in a different system, and maybe that guy comes in and makes an impact. But some big high-profile trade for a guy like Trey Hendrickson or anything along those lines, I don't see happening.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Chris here. I think the Eagles are in a mode where they're gonna, you never know what can happen here, because things are always fluid at this time of year for all NFL teams. But I just think we're going to see the Eagles when the free agent moves start coming. We're going to see guys who are getting 1-year deals, who are more veteran type guys who the Eagles feel like can be a piece for the 2025 season, but don't really look at them as, obviously last year they took their 3 first-day free agents were all guys that, well, I don't know if they looked at Zach Bond that way, but certainly they looked at Saquon and Bryce Huff that way as guys who were going to be core pieces here. And Zach Bond became one along the way. I don't think we're looking at that in free agency, and I don't think if Howie wants to make a trade, it would be for that type of guy who they could have for 1 year. If it happens, I don't know who that guy is right now. And Trey Hendrickson, I think it's not going to be a guy. It's not going to be one of those, oh, wow, the Eagles got that guy. It's going to be somebody way more under the radar than that.
I agree with you guys, but I will say this. This is no knowledge, no talking to anybody else. It's like, I just look at the way that all those picks the Eagles are accumulating. They have a first, a second. They're projected to have 3 thirds, I believe, because you got the Reddick, their own, and a comp pick next year in 2026. You got the 4th rounds you're probably projected to get for Sweat, along with another one. And then you have a 5th you got for Green and their own. I don't think they're going to use all of them. I think they may take a chance. Maybe it's not immediately right away. Maybe they wait until OTAs are over, or maybe they wait till draft day. I don't know. Something just like I don't see them sitting on all those picks.
Swift type move. You thinking?
Yeah, I don't think I don't see them sitting on those picks. And I'll have a story coming out tomorrow about how they use their comp picks and what they flipped them for. And more I looked at it. They'll get. I just feel like they're going to get somebody. I don't know who. I don't know what. I don't know if it's an edge rusher. I don't know if it's a safety now. And the other guy I'm thinking about is not so much a trade per se, but Justin Simmons. He's got history of Fangio as a free agent, and he waited a long time before signing with the Falcons. And I wonder if he's like somebody they signed right before trading. I don't know. It's tough to see, but they're up to something. I don't know. Or maybe they're just getting more picks to try to, if next year's a disaster, they'll have some assets to change some stuff. And here's the other run pass question I have for you guys. The starting outside cornerback next year for the Eagles will be Kelee Ringo. Are you running or are you passing?
I'm gonna run with that. Although I think we're going to see, as we had this discussion a little bit last week with as far as what's going to happen with Cooper DeJean, I think we're going to see Cooper play in the base on the outside, and then Healy come on the field, which is going to be more often than not because that's just the today's NFL. You're using your nickel, you're using your slot cornerback most of the time. But I think Healy's, got a chance to be the guy, and he's got Georgia pedigree. I have some concerns about his coverage ability, but I think it's going to be his job to lose going into training camp.
It's tough to disagree with that. I think right now on Tuesday, March 11th, I'll say yes, but it's a long off season, and I agree with Bob, and I'm just not the most confident that it's definitely Kelee Ringo's job. You look at last season, he is a young player, but they trusted Isaiah Rodgers over him when they needed a corner, to come off the bench. And maybe they love Kelee Ringo, but I don't think it's a guarantee. You would expect some competition. Maybe it's a veteran on a 1-year deal. Maybe it's a day 2 draft pick, day 3 draft pick at corner. But right now, you would have to say Kelee Ringo, and a lot of players in the NFL take that jump in the 3rd year. So maybe that's what it is for Kelee Ringo. He's still a really young player, and but I'm not 100% confident, but I'll go yes for now.
All right, cool. And we're now at our final segment of the show, and I appreciate everybody for sticking around and listening to us. We're going to go to the 2-minute warning, where each of these guys will have 2 minutes to lay out their case for the question I'm about to ask. If they get it completed and everything's within under 2 minutes, everything's fine. If they don't get it, they'll hear a whistle, and then we'll make fun of them somehow. I don't know how yet. Today's a weird day. But anywho, we're going to start with Bob with you on this one. And the question is going to be this. All the losses in free agency so far on the defensive side of the ball, Will the Eagles, as currently constructed with the young guys filling in, be a top 5 unit? Your time starts now.
Well, it's a great question. If we know anything, if we learned anything in the last 2 years, it can fly from one direction to the other in a hurry. The Eagles were 26th, I think, in points allowed in 2023, and we're 31st in pass coverage or pass defense, 30th in points allowed in 2023. In 2024, I'll still say I'm shocked that this team became the best defense in the NFL, the best pass defense in the NFL. Had a lot to do with Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean having incredible rookie years. It had a lot to do with Zach Bond being great at linebacker. It also had a lot to do with Nakobe Dean being a great linebacker. And it also had a lot to do with Jalen Carter just stepping up and playing at another level in his second season. But we're talking about, and it also had a lot to do with CJ Gardner-Johnson coming back and being part of that safety. But now we're talking about, all right, we're CJ Gardner-Johnson not there anymore. Nakobe Dean probably not ready to, surprisingly ready to start the season. Probably not ready to start the season. Josh Sweat being gone, he wasn't great, but he was on the verge of great, really, really good, and certainly great in the Super Bowl. A lot of, and then you talk about Milton Williams, maybe the third or fourth best defense player on the team. Certainly, the conversation is one of the best, and he's going to. That's a lot of guys missing to expect to be a top 5 defense again. Vic Fangio has his work cut out for him. We'll see what he can do. He was magic in his first year. His work cut out in his second.
Nice. 9 seconds remaining. Good job. Good job. You did good this time. You didn't run over. And there you go. There you go. Yeah, there you go. Congratulations. All right, Cayden. Same question to you. Your 2 minutes will be on the clock when I give you the go on this one. All the losses in free agency so far have come on the defensive side. With the Eagles, as currently constructed today, with the young guys filling in, be a top 5 unit. Your time starts now.
Yeah, I'll lean towards yes, they're still going to be a top 5 unit despite all the losses because, one, the most important thing will be back is Vic Fangio. And look, you still have to have good personnel. And like Bob mentioned, you're losing a lot of key players, but and they're going to have to draft guys and they're going to have to sign cheap guys in here eventually. They're going to probably bring in a few veterans on the defensive side. And Vic Fangio is going to have to get the most out of it. But he showed last year that he could do that. Did anyone really expect Zach Bond to make an impact last year, before the year? I wasn't even a guy that a lot of people were penciling in as a starter. Last summer, it was Devin White who was supposed to start next to Nakobe Dean. Nobody expected Zach Bond to do what he did. And I don't think anyone expected Oren Burks to play to the level that he did when Nakobe Dean got hurt in the playoffs. So I think you have to have trust in Vic Fangio that he can get the most out of a group of young players. You saw that with the rookie corners last year and DeJean and Mitchell as well. So I have faith that Vic will be able to get a lot out of this personnel as long as they draft well. And how he did last year, so I have faith in him doing that again on defense this year. And then they have the most important players back, especially in the spine of this defense with Jalen Carter, who's going to continue to get better in year 3. Zach Bond, they re-signed the most important player they needed to get back. They got him back. They still got the young 2 rookie corners. Nolan Smith emerged at the end of the season and was really, really impressive in the playoffs. Jalen Hunt had a great Super Bowl. Moro Joma continued to get better throughout the year. I think they will be a top 5 defense. Will they be the number 1 defense? I don't know, but I think they'll be in the top 5.
19 seconds. So, you know what? I'll award Bob the win on this one.
No.
Bob did.
Play the music. Cue the music. Do it again. Do it again.
The ballpark?
Oh!
Yeah. I'm sure everybody would love to hear this because it's more about behind the scenes stuff. But yeah, I lost my soundboard on this. It reset itself. So I got drums, piano music, ballpark. My whistle's gone. So I'm glad you guys stayed under 2 minutes because I would have had to splice that whistle back in there.
Oh, man, I should have gone longer.
Nah, it would have been some weird, awkward. Like
I had some good stuff to say.
Okay. Well, Cayden, Bob, I want to thank you guys for coming on the podcast again. And everybody out there, I want to thank you guys all for listening. Be sure to continue to watch our coverage on NJ.com/Eagles. We'll We'll have all the latest signings, all the latest news, including the Eagles going to the White House. They're apparently going on April 28th. We'll have that news up there as well, too. So for Bob Brookover and Cayden Steele, I'm Chris Franklin. Everybody have a good one. See ya. The No-Huddle Show podcast is brought to you by Penco Tech. With 2 convenient campuses in Blackwood, New Jersey and Bristol, PA, Penco Tech has provided comprehensive hands-on career training for more than 50 years, featuring programs in HVAC, electrical, plumbing, automotive technology, and more. With dedicated instructors and career placement assistants, Penco Tech can give you the skills and confidence to build a brighter future. Financial aid is available to those who qualify. Learn more and take the first step today at pencotech.edu. That's PENNCOTECH.edu.